It was a cold, clear evening when the stars seemed to speak to him, beckoning from the vast expanse above. In the middle of the bustling city, a small cafe on the corner felt like a forgotten sanctuary. The door jingled as it opened, and the soft glow from the overhead lights flickered like an invitation. He glanced up from his coffee, his eyes falling on her the moment she entered. Her presence was like a gentle breeze, a quiet force that shifted the very air around him. She wasn't like anyone he had ever met. Her name was Elara, and she walked with the grace of someone who had seen both the beauty and darkness of the world, yet still carried the light of hope in her soul. She had long, flowing hair the color of midnight, eyes that gleamed with the depth of unspoken secrets, and a smile that seemed to hold the weight of an entire universe. As she approached his table, his heart skipped. It wasn't a romantic kind of flutter, but a deeper one, like the feeling you get when you know something important is about to happen, even though you can't quite grasp what it is. She sat down without asking, as if she belonged there, as if their paths had already been intertwined by fate. "Do you believe in second chances?" she asked, her voice soft but unwavering. He chuckled nervously, unsure of how to answer, but there was something in her gaze that made him want to tell her everything. The answer, though, was complicated. He didn't believe in second chances, not after what he had been through. The scars of his past were too deep, and the idea of trying again seemed impossible. "Sometimes," he replied, his voice faltering, "but I don't know if I'm ready." Elara leaned back in her chair, her eyes scanning him as if she could see the fragments of his broken soul. "You don't need to be ready," she said, her words echoing in his mind. "You just need to try." He stared at her for a long moment, wondering if she had any idea how much her words weighed on him. How many times had he promised himself he would never let anyone close again? How many times had he told himself that he was better off alone? But Elara's presence made him question all of that. She tilted her head slightly, a curious expression on her face. "What's your name?" she asked. "Zayd," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The moment his name left his lips, something shifted in the air between them. Something unspoken. He felt an inexplicable connection, like a thread had been tied between their hearts. It was a connection he couldn't explain, couldn't understand. He had never felt anything like it before. Elara smiled, her eyes sparkling with something he couldn't quite place. "I've never believed in fate," she said, her tone light. "But for some reason I think we were meant to meet tonight." Zayd didn't know why, but he believed her. As the evening wore on, they talked about everything and nothing. She shared stories of her travels, her adventures, her battles, and her dreams. And with every word she spoke, Zayd felt himself being drawn deeper into her world. Her strength, her vulnerability, it all resonated with him. In some ways, it felt as though she had lived 100 lifetimes and learned to carry her past like a shield, a quiet defiance against the world. But there was something else in her eyes, something hidden beneath the surface, a longing, a sorrow, an unspoken desire to escape from something she couldn't escape. Zayd felt an overwhelming need to protect her, but he didn't know how. All he could do was listen, let her speak, and be there in the moment. But as the night drew to a close, Elara stood up, her hand brushing against his. A jolt of electricity shot through him at the contact, but she didn't seem to notice. "I have to go," she said, her voice softer now, more distant. He didn't want to let her go. He wanted to ask her to stay, to tell her that this night had changed everything, that he couldn't imagine life without knowing her. But the words caught in his throat. "Just one night," she whispered, as though reading his thoughts. "I'll be back, Zayd, but for now, just one night." And with that, she turned and walked away. Zayd watched her leave, his heart heavy with something he couldn't name. As the door closed behind her, a soft whisper floated back to him, carried by the wind. "Stay," it begged. He closed his eyes, the echo of her words lingering in his mind. Zayd sat alone, the empty chair across from him a cruel reminder of Elara's departure. The night had been filled with laughter, stories, and the kind of connection he hadn't felt in years. And now it felt as if the warmth of her presence had been stolen away by the wind, leaving only the chill of her absence behind. He took a long sip of his coffee, now lukewarm, and stared at the empty cup, lost in his thoughts. The words she had left him with, "just one night," echoed in his mind like a promise. A promise that was too fragile, too fleeting to hold on to, yet somehow still lingered in the air, refusing to dissipate. Zayd wasn't the type to chase after people. especially not after everything he'd been through. But there was something about Elara, something he couldn't shake. The way she had looked at him, the way she had spoken to him as if she knew exactly who he was without him ever saying a word. It was unnerving, and yet it felt right. He tried to focus, to push away the thoughts that kept circling back to her. His phone buzzed, pulling him out of his reverie. It was a message from his best friend, Amir. "Hey man, you good? Haven't heard from you in a while." Zayd smiled faintly and typed a quick reply. "Yeah, just a lot on my mind." He leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes for a moment. Elara's face appeared in his thoughts, her smile, her eyes, her voice. He couldn't understand it, couldn't explain it, but he felt like he had known her for so much longer than just a single evening. As if their connection had been written in the stars, waiting to be discovered. The door to the cafe opened again and Zayd's heart skipped a beat. But it wasn't Elara. It was just a couple of regulars from the neighborhood. He exhaled, trying to ignore the pang of disappointment in his chest. "Just one night," he muttered to himself, as if saying it aloud might help him make sense of it all. He could still hear her voice, her promise in his mind like an unfinished sentence. She had said she would come back, but what did that mean? Would she return to finish the conversation they had started? Or was she just another fleeting figure in his life? Someone who would vanish as quickly as she had appeared. A part of him wanted to believe in her. He wanted to believe that there was more to their encounter than just a random meeting, that there was something deeper at play here. But another part of him, his more guarded side, warned him to stay cautious, to keep his distance. Zayd had learned the hard way that trusting others wasn't always a safe bet. His past was full of broken promises and shattered hopes, and he wasn't sure if he had it in him to go through that kind of pain again. But Elara had offered him something different, something he hadn't experienced in a long time, a glimpse of what life could be like without the weight of his past holding him back. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, pulling him back to the present. Zayd stood up, ready to leave. He paid for his coffee, his thoughts still wrapped around Elara. As he stepped outside, the cool night air hit his face and he breathed deeply, trying to clear his mind. He walked down the street, his steps slow and deliberate, as if he was searching for something. Maybe it was answers, maybe it was closure, or maybe it was hope. Just as he reached the end of the block, he heard it again. That whisper, "Stay." This time it wasn't in his head. He turned quickly, scanning the street, but there was no one in sight. His pulse quickened. Was it just his imagination? Or was Elara still out there, somehow reaching out to him? Zayd stopped in his tracks, staring into the empty street. He felt a pull, an invisible force urging him to turn around, to look harder, to take a step forward. He took a deep breath. "Stay," he whispered back to the night. But Elara was gone. Zayd couldn't shake the feeling that Elara was still near. The city around him seemed like a maze of fleeting shadows and forgotten promises, and he found himself lost in its labyrinth. Every street he walked down felt empty without her. The faces of strangers blurred into one indistinguishable crowd, and yet none of them could replace her. He wasn't the kind of man who believed in fate, or destiny, or love at first sight, but there was something about the way she had looked at him, something in the depth of her eyes that had pierced through the walls he had built around himself, something that felt like it wasn't just an accident, something that made him believe for a brief moment that they had been meant to cross paths. But what did that even mean? Zayd stopped at a street corner, staring up at the neon sign of the cafe where they had met. He had been there countless times before, never once thinking that it could be the place where his life would change, and yet here he was, standing in the same spot, hoping for a glimpse of her. He glanced down at his phone again. No new messages. He had texted her earlier that evening, just a simple, "Hope you made it home safely." But there had been no reply. No sign that she had ever received it, let alone thought about him after she left. The silence between them weighed heavily in his chest, a constant reminder that he had no control over this. She had made it clear that she wasn't staying, that this was only supposed to be one night, and yet Zayd couldn't bring himself to let go of the hope that maybe she would return. Maybe she hadn't meant to walk away so quickly. Maybe she had been just as captivated by their connection as he had been. But it didn't make sense. People didn't just appear out of nowhere and change your life in a single conversation. They didn't promise you things they couldn't keep. Zayd knew that better than anyone. He turned away from the cafe and began to walk again, trying to shake the thoughts from his head. His steps echoed in the quiet night, and as he walked, the city seemed to grow quieter. The hum of distant traffic, the murmur of voices in nearby buildings, it all faded away. All that mattered now was Elara, the woman who had promised him one night and then left without a trace. Zayd stopped again, realizing he had walked all the way to the park at the edge of town. The trees loomed over him, their branches stretching like the arms of an old friend reaching out for him. He took a seat on a nearby bench, the cold metal beneath him offering little comfort. He closed his eyes, trying to find some peace in the stillness of the night. But the more he thought about Elara, the more restless he became. What was it about her that had captured his attention so completely? Why couldn't he move on, let it go, and go back to the life he had before? Zayd, he muttered to himself, running a hand through his hair. What are you doing? He opened his eyes and looked up at the sky, where the stars flickered above him like tiny whispers of the universe's secrets. The city was quiet now, save for the occasional rustle of leaves in the trees. It was as if the world itself was waiting for something to change, waiting for a decision to be made. Zayd's thoughts were interrupted by the soft sound of footsteps approaching. He looked up and saw a figure emerging from the shadows. His heart skipped a beat, and for a moment he dared to hope. It was her. But as the figure came into the light, his hope shattered. It wasn't Elara. It was just a young woman walking her dog, her face lost in thought, unaware of his gaze. Zayd exhaled, feeling a wave of disappointment wash over him. He hadn't even realized how badly he had been hoping for her to appear. How desperate he had become. He stood up from the bench, brushing off his coat. She's not coming back, he told himself, his voice barely above a whisper. But even as he said it, a small part of him couldn't believe it. A small part of him still clung to the belief that she would come back, that this wasn't the end. He walked away from the park, his heart heavy, but still filled with the faintest flicker of hope. Days passed, and Zayd's life slowly fell back into its old rhythm. The weight of his thoughts didn't lessen, but he learned to bury them beneath the mundane tasks of everyday life. Work, errands, and the dull thrum of existence seemed to keep him grounded, though every now and then his mind would wander back to Elara and the space she had left behind. He didn't go back to the cafe, didn't sit at the same table where they had met, but the memories of her lingered. They crept into his thoughts when he least expected it, while waiting for his coffee or walking through the crowded streets. He tried to push them away, but they always came back, relentless and uninvited. One morning, after a particularly restless night, Zayd found himself standing at the doorstep of his apartment holding an envelope. The handwriting on the front was unmistakable, the curve of the letters as familiar as his own name. Zayd. His heart skipped a beat. He turned the envelope over in his hands, almost afraid to open it, but he didn't need to. He knew deep down that it was from her. With trembling hands, he tore open the envelope and unfolded the letter inside. Zayd, I know this must be a shock to you, but I couldn't leave without writing you this letter. When I promised you one night, I didn't expect the impact it would have on me. I didn't expect to meet someone who could make me feel so seen, so understood in such a short amount of time, and maybe that's why I left. I thought I could walk away and never look back, but here I am writing to you. The truth is, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm looking for, but I know that something about you, about us, has unsettled me in a way I can't explain. You probably think I'm foolish, running off like that, but I promise you, Zayd, it wasn't about you. It was about me. I've spent so much of my life protecting myself, keeping everyone at arm's length, that I didn't know how to let someone in. Not like that. I know I told you that we could never be more than one night, but sometimes the heart doesn't listen to the mind, and right now my heart is telling me that I need to be honest with you. I don't know where this will go or if it will go anywhere at all, but I wanted to say that I don't regret meeting you. I don't regret that night. If you're open to it, I'd like to see you again. I understand if you don't want to, but I needed to say this to let you know that I haven't forgotten you. Take care, Zayd. Elara. Zayd stared at the letter for a long time, his hands trembling slightly as he processed her words. He had never imagined this. He had expected silence, maybe even the finality of her absence. But not this. Not a letter. Not an admission that, in some strange way, he had made an impact on her too. The words she had written echoed in his mind, each sentence carrying the weight of everything they hadn't said the night they met. Her honesty, her vulnerability, it felt like a gift. And in a way it was. Elara had shared something with him. Not just her words, but her heart, her fears and her uncertainties. She had opened herself up in a way that few people ever did. It was an invitation, though one that left him more conflicted than ever. Zayd felt a warmth in his chest. It was as if the walls he had so carefully built around himself were beginning to crumble, brick by brick, with every line of her letter. He took a deep breath and glanced out of the window, his eyes searching the busy streets below. He wondered where she was, what she was doing, if she was thinking about him just as he had been thinking about her. He wanted to respond, to tell her that he hadn't forgotten her either, but the words felt too big, too heavy. He wasn't sure if he was ready to dive into the unknown again. But the truth was, he couldn't ignore the pull she had on him. He couldn't walk away from this without at least seeing where it could lead. He folded the letter carefully, slipping it back into the envelope and placed it on his desk. He would wait, for now. He would think, and when the time was right, he would reach out to her. Zayd knew one thing for certain. He wasn't ready to let go of her yet. Not now, not ever. Zayd spent the next few days in a haze of uncertainty. Elara's letter weighed heavily on his mind, pulling him in two directions. Part of him wanted to pick up the phone, dial her number and ask her to meet him again, to see if what they had shared that one night could turn into something more. But then another part of him hesitated. What if it was just a fleeting connection for her? What if she was only chasing a moment that she had already decided to leave behind? What if he was reading too much into it? The questions circled in his mind like vultures, and he couldn't stop them. No matter how much he tried to focus on his work or his daily routine, they always came back, gnawing at the edges of his thoughts. It was on the 5th day after receiving the letter that he decided he couldn't wait any longer. He had to know. He had to see if there was more to their connection than just one night. Zayd stood in front of the cafe again, his heart racing in his chest. He had walked by it every day since the night Elara left, but he hadn't dared to go inside. Not until now. His hands were cold, and his palms were sweaty as he pushed open the door and stepped inside. The familiar warmth of the cafe hit him immediately, and for a moment, he felt like he was stepping back into a memory, as if nothing had changed. But everything had. The world outside had continued turning, but in this small space, it felt as though time had stood still. He scanned the room, his gaze lingering on each face, each person lost in their own world. And then just as he was about to turn away, he saw her, Elara. She was sitting in the corner by the window, her eyes focused on the book in front of her, a cup of tea untouched beside her. She was alone, and the sight of her sitting there, so serene and calm, made his heart ache. He took a tentative step toward her, his breath catching in his throat. Was he ready for this? Was he ready to face the emotions she had stirred in him? But before he could second-guess himself, Elara looked up. Her gaze met his, and for a brief moment neither of them spoke. There was no awkwardness, no hesitation, just an unspoken understanding that they had both been waiting for this moment. "Zayd," she said, her voice soft but steady. "I didn't think you would come." He smiled, his heart racing even faster now. "I didn't think I could stay away." Elara's lips curved into a faint smile as she gestured for him to sit down. "I'm glad you're here." Zayd took a seat across from her, the weight of the past few days suddenly lifting. He had so many questions, so many things he wanted to say, but he didn't know where to start. Instead, he just watched her for a moment, taking in the sight of her, the way her hair fell around her face, the way her eyes sparkled when she looked at him. "You've been on my mind a lot," he finally said, his voice low. Elara's expression softened and she placed her book aside. "I know. I've been thinking about you too." The words felt like a balm to Zayd's soul, soothing the anxiety that had been building in his chest for days. There was something in her eyes, something that told him she wasn't just saying this to be polite. She meant it. "I didn't know what to make of everything," he continued, his voice a little shaky. "I didn't know if I should leave it all behind or take a chance." Elara leaned forward, her gaze steady. "And now?" "Now?" Zayd hesitated, his heart racing. "Now I'm here, and I'm willing to take that chance." "If you are." Elara's smile deepened and she reached across the table, her fingers brushing his. The touch was simple, yet it sent a jolt of warmth through him, a reminder of the connection they had shared that night, and the connection that was still there, stronger than ever. "I think I'm ready," she said softly, her voice full of emotion. "I just needed to know that you were too." Zayd nodded, his heart full of relief and hope. "I am." And in that moment, everything fell into place. The uncertainty, the hesitation, it all melted away. All that mattered was that they had found each other again. Zayd leaned back in his chair, a smile tugging at his lips. He had no idea what the future held for them. Maybe it was too soon to say anything for sure, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was exactly where he needed to be. Elara was here, and that was enough. The days following their meeting felt like a dream to Zayd. It was as if the universe had paused, just long enough for him to realize how much he had wanted to be with Elara. There was a sense of peace now, something he hadn't felt in years, and he couldn't help but wonder if it was because of her. Every moment they spent together was like a small puzzle piece clicking into place. They would walk through the city talking about everything and nothing at all, their conversations flowing effortlessly. Elara's presence made everything feel lighter, as though the weight of his past had suddenly become bearable, no longer an anchor holding him down. But as much as Zayd wanted to embrace this feeling, he couldn't escape the nagging voice in his head, the one that had been warning him about getting too close. Was he ready to open up again, to let someone in so completely? Could he trust himself, and could he trust her? He had been burned before, and the scars still lingered. One evening, as they sat by the window of the cafe, watching the world outside slowly fade into darkness, Zayd noticed a shift in the air. Elara had been quieter than usual, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup absent-mindedly. There was something about her silence that felt different, heavy, almost as if she was waiting for something. He leaned forward, his eyes studying her face. "What's going on?" he asked gently, his voice soft but with a trace of concern. Elara looked up, her eyes meeting his, and for a moment, there was an unspoken tension between them. The weight of everything that had happened, everything they hadn't said, seemed to hang in the air. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice quiet but resolute. "About us. About what this could be." Zayd felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He had feared this moment. The moment when reality would set in, and the fairy tale would end. "What are you thinking?" he asked, bracing himself for whatever she might say. Elara took a deep breath, her eyes searching his as if she were trying to find the right words. "I don't want to rush into anything, Zayd, but I also don't want to hold back. I can't keep running from what I feel. The truth is, I've been scared. Scared of letting someone get close, scared of getting hurt again." Her words mirrored his own fears, and for a moment, Zayd couldn't speak. He understood exactly what she meant. He had spent so long protecting himself, building walls around his heart, that the idea of tearing them down felt impossible. "I get it," Zayd said, his voice steady but laced with vulnerability. "I've been scared too. I didn't know if I could trust myself again, let alone trust someone else." Elara's gaze softened and she reached across the table, her hand gently resting on his. "I think we both know that trust doesn't come easy, but maybe we can figure it out together." The simplicity of her words struck him. She wasn't asking for forever. She wasn't asking for him to promise anything. She was asking for a chance to take a step forward together, even if they didn't know exactly where that would lead. Zayd looked down at her hand, his fingers instinctively wrapping around hers. In that moment, he felt a rush of clarity. Maybe life didn't have to be about perfect answers, or knowing exactly what the future held. Maybe it was enough to be present, to be real with each other, and to trust that whatever happened, they could face it together. "I'm willing to try," he said, his voice quiet, but filled with determination. "I'm ready to trust you, Elara. I'm ready to trust myself again." A smile spread across Elara's face, and for the first time in days, Zayd felt a true sense of peace. She leaned forward, pressing a soft kiss to his cheek. It was simple, yet it felt like a promise to explore this connection, to face the unknown together, without fear. As they sat there, their hands intertwined, Zayd realized something he hadn't understood before. Trust wasn't about having all the answers. It was about being willing to take the first step, to believe in the possibility of something beautiful, even if it scared you. And for the first time in a long time, he believed. Weeks turned into months, and Zayd and Elara's bond grew stronger with each passing day. Their connection, once fragile and uncertain, had solidified into something real, something they both cherished. They had faced their fears, their doubts, and had come out the other side with a newfound trust not just in each other, but in themselves. The days they spent together were a gentle blend of quiet moments and spontaneous adventures. They explored the city, wandered through parks hand in hand, and shared their dreams, fears, and everything in between. The walls they had each built around their hearts were slowly coming down, piece by piece, as they learned to trust the bond they had formed. One evening, as they sat in a small, cozy cafe, one they had discovered during one of their many walks, Zayd couldn't help but watch Elara. The way the soft light of the candles flickered in her eyes, the way she smiled when she looked at him, the way her laugh sounded like music in the air. It was all so effortless now, so natural, that it felt like they had always been meant to be here in this moment together. "Zayd," Elara said, her voice pulling him from his thoughts, "do you ever wonder what comes next?" He looked at her, surprised by the question, but smiled gently. "I think about it sometimes," he replied, his gaze softening as he reached across the table to take her hand. "But I've realized that maybe it's not about knowing what comes next. Maybe it's about living in the moment, about trusting that whatever happens we'll handle it together." Elara's eyes searched his face, and for a moment she didn't speak. Then with a slow and deliberate movement she stood up, pulling him to his feet with her. Without a word she led him outside, through the bustling streets until they reached a small quiet park that overlooked the city skyline. The view was breathtaking, the city lights twinkling like stars below them. They stood there for a while, silent, simply taking in the beauty of the night. Zayd wrapped his arm around her waist, pulling her closer. He could feel her breath against his chest, steady and calm. It was a moment of stillness in a world that was constantly moving, a moment that felt like it belonged to only them. "I've been thinking," Elara said, breaking the silence, "about us, about everything we've been through, and I think I'm ready to let go of the past, to fully embrace the future. With you." Zayd's heart swelled with emotion as he looked down at her. "I'm ready too," he whispered. "I don't need to know what the future holds. All I need to know is that we're in this together." Elara smiled, her eyes sparkling in the dim light. "I've never felt more sure of anything." In that moment, something shifted in the air between them, something unspoken yet powerful. It wasn't just love, it was trust, vulnerability, and a shared understanding of what it meant to truly be together. It was a bond that neither of them had expected, but one that had grown organically, rooted in their willingness to be honest and present with each other. As they stood there, the city stretched out before them, and Zayd realized that this was only the beginning of a new chapter in their lives, one that wasn't defined by fear or doubt, but by the strength they had found in each other. No, they didn't know what the future would bring. But they had each other, and that was more than enough. They had learned that sometimes life's most beautiful moments are the ones that come when you least expect them, when you're willing to take a chance, to trust and to let go of the past. Zayd pulled Elara into a gentle kiss, and in that kiss he found everything he needed, the promise of a future together, the certainty that they could face anything as long as they were side by side. When they finally broke apart, Elara rested her head against his chest, and Zayd whispered, "This is just the beginning. Elara, I don't know what comes next, but I know I want to be with you through it all." She looked up at him, her smile soft and full of promise. "And I want to be with you, Zayd. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together."